Hey everyone, this is David from Statfreaks. Today's episode of Quick Insights is episode 3 and we're going to be looking at Greyhound favourites. Diving straight into it, we have a list of tracks currently sorted by the most records we have per track. So Albion Park, we've had the most records stored in our system, 974, and favourites out of that 974 have won 37.7% of the time. Converting that to a price is $2.70, and then the average price of the winners was $2.40. So we could see there's not so much an edge over the market just backing favourites, and it looks like pretty much across the board it's like that. Over to the right hand side we have our favourites combined when we rank something first on our reports. So that would be in this race, for example, this runner here, Logo 2.4, it would be the highest ranked SFR, that would get a 1. And we can see when it's combined and it's a favourite, so if it's ranked first in our data and it's a favourite, it'll win 41.7% of the time. Here we can see the market's fairly crunched on average, those prices anyway. So regardless of that, the overall across all the data, we don't capture every single race, but as many as we can across Australia. Last year there was a fair few, so up until 2019 and pretty much current, the average strike rate of favourites is around 38.1. We can see Warragul is, for example, slightly ahead of the average. Same with Sandown Park, Shepparton, and then as we scroll down there are some that drop below, like Wentworth Park 37.3. Now the highest strike rate tracks, excluding ones where we don't have many records for, if I look at Warrnambool for example, it's 48.3% of the time where we've covered a Warrnambool race, the favourites have won, which is fairly high. And then scrolling down we can see probably the best one is like Bendigo, Richmond and the Meadows, over 40%. So Bendigo, Richmond's at 41, the Meadows, and so on. Now the worst tracks we could look at where the favourites have a fairly low strike rate is really starting around Nowra and Cranbourne. We can see favourites at Cranbourne are just not winning as much as they should. That's almost 8% below the average of what favourites are winning. Then we've got Angle Park, Gosford, I just untick it, Geelong. So where the records are fairly high, we've sort of a red flag for favourites. So once again we've got, all these tracks which are really high. Anything above 38.1 is good, which would be these ones here: Hillsville, Ballarat, Warragul, Sandown Park, Ipswich, Shepparton, Grafton, the Meadows, Richmond, Bendigo. I'd throw in there maybe Warrnambool and Bathurst, but the records are not that high, so it's hard to indicate. And then worst performing tracks, as I said, Cranbourne, Angle Park, Horsham, Geelong, Northam, Gawler, Sale. Anything pretty much below 38.1 I would red flag Albion Park. Now cross-referencing it with our data can change the dynamics dramatically. So what I've done here, I've put in a filter which is our SFR rank, and on our reports it's basically just in a race the rank of this SFR column. So that Greyhound there, Logo, would get a 1. The second highest ranked values, which was Roulette and Such a Villain, would get 2. Mungo Barrier would get third ranked highest. That's what that represents. So if I, for example, focus on, let's just say the top 2, everything changes completely. So to give you an indication, so let's look at Albion Park. Originally, on its own, just favourites at Albion Park were winning 37.7% of the time. If I then say, well, I want to look at favourites only that were ranked 1 or 2 on our data, I can see that the dynamics change a fair bit. where it gets to 40.7, so a lot higher, and still a fair way away from the winning average price of those greyhounds, which is a bit of a concern. But I can then, trim it down even further. If I go to 1 and 1, it's still tough at that track, just on favourite and best ranked greyhound we have. Warrigal, on the other hand, a lot higher, 47.1, and there is a slight edge in backing favourites of Warrigal, where we have number 1. So that's an interesting insight there. Now, if I sort it based off strike rate, I could then see some of the tracks like Richmond. It profiles fairly well, almost 1 in 2. Ipswich, really well. Warrigal, and I'm basically looking at the tracks where there's a lot of records to validate, and then the tracks where it's extremely poor would be Wentworth Park, for example, 145. So anything we've ranked high at Wentworth Park and is a favourite at Wentworth Park is only winning 36.6% of the time, which is very low of where it should be. And Cranbourne, Ballarat, Shepparton. Now I can also break it up the other way. I can look at, just say, in the top 4 that we have. Anything we put in the top 4 and then is a favourite, and I can once again do that exercise and see the low tracks. So Cranbourne's consistently down there. So favourites seem to be just not working, and even when we've got them highly rated in our data, they're still not winning. And then we go to the other end of the spectrum, and Bendigo and Richmond seem to be fairly high with a lot of records. So just to recap and conclude this session, Albion Park we've had the most records for, and it's a 37.7 strike rate, below the average. So the average of all the favourites that we've captured over the past 12 to 13 months is 38.1, and the tracks that are above that, where we've got a lot of records for, which is above that average, are good places to start. Warrigal, Sandown Park, Shepparton, the Meadows, Ipswich, Richmond, Hillsville, Ballarat and Bendigo, and possibly Grafton as well. All the others on this screen are below that sort of average of what favourites are winning at, and there's some things to keep in mind if you do look at backing favourites at certain types of tracks. The other thing we looked at exploring, where we have ranked in our data first and also a favourite, and Warrigal, Richmond, Ipswich seem to be the tracks that work really well when combined with favourites in our data. Thanks for tuning in. If you're looking for deeper insights into profit and loss, return on investment and strike rate analysis, subscribe to our monthly membership for full access to our VIP area and learning content.